Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our next session of AI Tech Talks Live. And today we are demystifying hiring for AI startups. This is the part two. Last time we talked about a few of the questions that came from your side and our side as well, based on my experience on hiring for my AI startup, which is called Robometrics Machine and Skive. And yes, we are still hiring. So if you're interested, please reach out. Today we'll be covering a few questions, three main things about hiring for AI startups. So one is very specifically about what you need to put in your resume. The second is about what can you expect from an employer when you go into an interview for an AI role, and the third is about what does it entail, or how do you say that you actually worked on an AI startup or an AI project? Because nowadays AI is everywhere. So we'll cover these three questions. And if there's any additional questions, we will cover that as well. Just a reminder, we are live on Facebook Live. This is a totally live session. We also have an interactive chat on Clubhouse, audio chat. So if you'd like to join that, please feel free. And with that, let's start with our first question. What should I put in my resume after working in an AI startup? The foremost thing to remember is whatever you put in your resume, you need to make sure that you know 10 things about each word you put there. So if you're saying that you worked in an AI startup and you were part of a team that was working on an AI project, you better know everything about that. Now, knowing everything doesn't mean that you could put everything on a resume, because some of those things may be confidential. And that's one of the most things to remember, which is not in terms of what you should put, but what you should not put. In, a, in every high growth startup, and also in a big company, for example, like Google or Facebook, you want to be 100% sure that everything that you put in your resume is approved by your manager or by the company. There is nothing confidential in it. A lot of the time, people forget that and they end up in a lot of trouble. So please don't do that. Make sure that you work with your manager to figure out what you should be putting in your resume. And that's a good thing. That's what exit interviews are for. Use that time for the exit interview with your manager to work together to figure out what should go in my resume. Your manager most likely knows much more about a specific project that you worked on than you sometimes. So it makes a lot of sense for you to just work together and come up with what would be those 2 or 3 lines that I can put in my resume. Sometimes you cannot talk much about how you did it, but you could talk about what you did. Sometimes you could put some numeric metrics that may be already in public domain. But the trick here is to work with your hiring manager, or to work with your manager to figure out what you should put in your resume. And don't be shy about it. And we are all living in, at a stage in a society where it's okay to leave one company and go to another. So it's natural for you to work with your manager on some of these questions. Now, yes, it's not a good idea to be jumping ships every few months. That's the worst thing you can do in your resume, which is to have where you have many projects, many companies where each time you work for 2 months or 3 months, nobody will hire you, or nobody who will want you for the long term will hire you, or nobody who will want you to work on a critical technology will actually hire you. Just to summarize this question, work with your hiring manager. Have a 1 or 2 line. That's very precise, concise, and to some extent it also If it's not confidential, mentions about what area you worked on and what did you achieve. Second question, what do employers ask in an interview for an AI role? My company have been hiring engineers in the last couple of weeks, and and I will tell you some of the questions that I have been asking personally, especially in the introduction calls, to really try to figure out do a specific candidate who's applying knows about what they say. It has become a fashion to put AI everywhere. I worked on an AI project, or I worked on supervised learning, or I worked on deep learning. But what ends up happening, and that's what I've seen in the last couple of interviews that I did myself for hiring software engineering interns and even for senior positions, is that people don't know anything about what they have in their resume. They say they work on an AI project, but ultimately they actually have not worked on an AI project. What they did was nothing related to AI, even if the broader project was related to artificial intelligence. They did some simple data analysis, which has nothing to do with AI itself or machine learning. But that was part of a bigger project, which was for building an AI product. So the first question you will get asked is, well, what did you do? Okay, let's take a simple example. Okay, this is the project name XYZ AI project. So what was your role in XYZ? You mentioned you worked on supervised learning. Okay, great. But can you explain more on which algorithm you used within supervised learning? Did you write the code for the supervised learning, or did you use an external library? Most of the time, it will be the latter. Okay, you use PyTorch. Let's figure out a little bit more. How many lines of code that you write? What was the scripting language that you used? And some of these questions, as you see, goes one after another, and it goes more in the details. And somebody who has actually not worked on AI will not be able to answer these. So that's one track where an employer may actually ask. So if you're saying you worked on artificial intelligence, you better know everything about it. And there may be a case where some of these things may be confidential. So you also want to make sure you do not tell anything that is confidential. And working on AI is different than working on AI project. AI project may be a product of the company, and that is the only product that company is working on. But if you have not really worked specifically on an AI component itself, then you really didn't work on AI, and it's okay to say you didn't work on AI. Our third question was, does working in a project that involves AI means I worked on AI? And that goes to the last point I was making, that it's a different thing than working on an AI product versus working on AI itself. In the latter, it more or less means is that you were doing something substantial in artificial intelligence. So it could be data mining using machine learning. It could be working on a CNN, or using an existing library like TensorFlow to implement a convolutional neural network and optimizing it for a specific use case, or to make it faster, or to process 10x more data using the same compute. Those are some of the things, if you're doing, means you actually worked on artificial intelligence. Now, if you're just trying to make things better, where some of these things are much more automated, that's a boundary condition. I will actually say that you did not work on AI. If the only thing you are doing is on the DevOps side, where you are trying to get 4 modules, making sure that automates, or even doing some simple testing. And lastly, it's very easy for an employer, especially if your hiring manager is technical. And I've seen that in startups, uh, even the leads of the company or the founder and CEO will be technical in nature. It's very easy for him or her to figure out what you actually did by just asking 3 or 4 questions. And just to summarize these 3 questions, because I think this is important. So the first thing is, it's okay to say you did not work on AI. It is also okay to say that I'm really passionate about technology and I'm really passionate about artificial intelligence, but I did not get a chance to work on that in my last company, even though we were building something on AI. That's a great answer. As opposed to putting something in your resume or saying that you actually did work on artificial intelligence, and after a sequence of second or third question, you're not able to explain much. It is also okay to say that I know a lot about this area, but the way I implemented it, the algorithm that I used it, was confidential or it was proprietary, so I will not be able to tell you. But I could, in general, explain to you what general AI unsupervised learning algorithm or reinforcement learning algorithm is. And that's the key, that in an interview, you're trying to really build that trust. And sometimes you will just have 15 to 20 minutes to build that trust. And as somebody who has been doing for a very long time, interviewed thousands of people, it's very easy to break that trust because all you have is 15 minutes and 1 or 2 questions that you're not able to answer, which which tells that you don't have expertise. It's okay, but more important, if somehow you say something where the trust is broken, then it's a game over. So make sure that make sure that you are working on building the trust. So it's okay to say I don't know something, but hey, I'm really passionate about working on artificial intelligence. I will work 996, and that's what, and for people who don't know 996, that's what, if you ask Jack Ma, he will tell you 996 work hour or work culture. And if you ask Elon Musk, he will say 100 hours a week. And that's actually one and the same thing. And then the last aspect is on building this trust is don't write something that you have not done in your resume, because that will just get you into the wrong direction, and you don't want that, because most of the times either you will be interviewed by somebody who is very technical in nature, even in the first round or even in an introduction call, or in the second round you will reach somebody who is much more technical in nature. So you may pass the first one, but you may not pass the second one, and that pretty much wastes everyone's time, yours and ours. So it's a good idea to be straight, to be concise, to be precise, to know what you're talking about, and more important, being passionate about what the company is doing. What is their actual vision? We'll be back next week. This is all for today. We may go to part 3 of hiring for an AI startup, because a lot of you are looking for a job. So this is a good topic to have and continue for one more week, and then we'll switch gears. In the meantime, if you have any questions for me, please reach out on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on WeChat. And again, we are Skive, where we are building machines that feel with use cases in aerospace, healthcare, autonomous cars, and outer space. If you're interested, please reach out to us. You can email me directly on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or you could email us at jobs@skive.it. Thanks, everyone. See you all next week.